did the devo, and I don't know if you recall, but I had that old catchphrase that, Dan informed me afterwards that had been around for a long time, probably longer than me, I don't know. But it's people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And so this is sort of a second part to that, and of course I'm completely centered around the whole vision and what are we here for, what are we doing in this community in particular. And I gained some perspective when we went on our trip to Oregon. Whenever we travel, we always look up a church. If we're not going to be here in Salmon on Sunday, we always find a congregation somewhere. And we typically, I like, if I can find a website, I'll look them up and see, make sure that it's, everything's in line and looks right. And I don't like to just, show up and take kind of a wild guess at it. I kind of like to know that it's church. And so we went to Tillamook, and there is a congregation in Tillamook. And we went there for 2 Sundays. They did not have any Wednesday evening studies. They just did Sunday morning class and sermon. And when we arrived, so there was, the 4 of us, and then Frank and June, and then Lucas was with us, and he's might be the nephew for Libby. And so there were about 7 of us, and I would say there were about 7 members in that congregation. So that Sunday, they doubled with just our family. And the preacher did a very good job, good lesson. In fact, I noticed that he posted it on the website not too long ago, and he did the sermon as well, did a good job there, and it was really encouraging despite the small number. And then the following Sunday we came back, and the preacher was ill and didn't make it. And apparently that had never happened before because nobody knew what to do. And but we supported so there was a 7 of us again, and there was, I don't even know if it wasn't the full membership there, but maybe 5, 6 people were there from their congregation. And then there were a couple and a couple other families. So all in all, there were probably around 24, 25 people for worship that Sunday there. And only maybe a quarter to a fifth were the actual membership. And so what we did, the few of us, it was only our family and then a couple, and one church member was there for the, of the membership there, was actually there for the class. So we went through Ephesians 4 and did some studying. And then when the rest of everyone showed up for worship, we made do. The group, kind of just supported. We let the members there kind of guided, and they did not know what to do. They didn't know how to lead songs. They could pray, but they felt lost. It was like they'd never had the preacher sick before, and they just had no idea what to do. So we just all sort of pitched in, supported them. They still led the service, the membership there, and I thought it was a very encouraging experience. Not just for me, but I felt that it was very encouraging for them. They seemed really, really grateful for the support, for the help, and that they weren't judged or harshly treated as a result of the circumstances they were in. And one lady came up to us and she said, I came from Texas where we had like 800 members in our congregation, and I've come here and we've only got about 8. She said, that's quite a change for me. And it's difficult to make those big shifts from things that you're used to. And so it was good discussion, and when I talked to one of the other family members, he had a couple of kids, and he gave some input, as part of the, for the service that we did. And he was really encouraging. He was from the Seattle area. They come down once a year to vacation, and I just felt it was was more of a family type of feeling than I typically feel when I go to other churches and to other congregations outside of town. But it also got me to thinking, I've heard oftentimes throughout the church, we're only one generation away from apostasy, and those kind of things. And in light of that, in our vision of what we're trying to do, it gives me some real perspective that, first of all, we are really blessed here. I used to think, I don't know anything other than this congregation as far as the church goes. I was baptized here, I was taught here, baptized, and, this is what I know. And so when I go to a really huge congregation, usually I feel quite lost. But it was very different because I'm not used to going to where there's just a small handful of people here. So it gave me a lot of perspective, but also gives the urgency to that message. There were no children, they were all elderly. There wasn't one, young one there. And we have that here. We have more people that are interested here, it seems like. I don't know, maybe it's a coastal thing, I'm not sure. But things are not the same on the coast, I don't think. So people just don't seem to be as interested in it. But anyway, with that, before I go through too much time, I've been doing a little bit of reading and kind of on the history of the church. And in the early 1900s, and this comes from, I've been reading this book, starting to read this book. I haven't been reading it very long. Frank gave it to me. It's Evangelism Simplified. And then there's a neat little table that they drew information from the U.S. Census Bureau on. And in 1906, they estimated around 85 million people in the U.S., and about 160,000 of which were in the church, which is about a 1 to 535 ratio. So for every 535 people, you find one person who's in the church. And then by the time you got to 1967 to 1975, our population went from 85 to 200 million, approximately. And our membership went from about 160,000 to 2.5 million. So our ratio went down to, went up, I guess you might say, to 1:84 from the late 60s to early 70s. So in a span of about 40 years, the church was growing tremendously. And they did that through 2 world wars and a Great Depression. A lot of hardship. And it's still. And then, by the time we hit 2017, where we've gone from 200 million to about 326 or so million people, and about 1.1 million in the church. So it went down. The population went up, and then in the U.S., and then the church membership population in the church halved. So again, in the next 40 years, we dropped to 1 in 289. Now we're not at the 1906 level of 1 in 500 and something, but we made it halfway back there in the same amount of time that it took to grow. Well, why? That's like the big question. What happened? Why? And most people, if you ask most people, and if you ask me, the thing I would probably say first is it's something to do with our culture. Things are changing. Changing times. We're just not as interested in God anymore, and those are definitely major factors. Those are very outward type of thoughts, though, because that's the obvious answer. Is we're in a morally declining nation. Blah blah blah. You can go on. Well, what about some of the? Let's think, not outwardly, but about us internally. Inwardly. Did we have a shift in our focus? Like, what were they doing? From 1906 to the 1960s that grew the church. What happened? And then what changed from mid-70s into the 80s and onward? Well, we did have some very advanced technology, but they didn't have the technology back then. I don't know. Did we get interested in big buildings? Did we get interested in different kinds of ministries and programs? And how much money we have for fancy gadgets and stuff like that? Because they didn't have any of that back then. We've got more tools available. We've got the web. We've got Facebook. We've got all kinds of ways to reach people, but it doesn't seem to be doing the trick. I think one of the answers maybe, and I don't know this for sure, but personal evangelism. people studied the Bible. We studied with people, each other people. So, with a few minutes I have remaining, I'm just going to read a couple of scriptures. So we'll start with John chapter 6, verse 44, 45. No man can come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him, and I will raise him up at the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall be all taught of God. Every man, therefore, that hath heard and hath learned of the Father, come unto me. So, teaching and learning, just very basic things. 2 Timothy 2, verse 2. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. We separate ourselves. We have our own little bubbles, and I'm working from home. I don't even see people anymore. I'm so busy with kids, I never get out and talk with anyone. We've all got our excuses, right? We've all got, but we do seem to be very more fragmented than we used to be in a lot of ways, despite having all the connections of technology, and despite, having many more neighbors much closer to each other than we used to. But we do some to, if you go on to the verse 3 of 2 Timothy, thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. We're meant to be like the infantry. And it's not just the preacher or an elder or a deacon. It's all of us. We all have that calling. That's not just a one type of Christian. That's all Christians. And we're meant to be in the front ranks. And it is, like Paul was talking about, on Sunday, it's a spiritual war. And if we're not out there in it, then people are not being encouraged. And therefore our numbers decline. We die off. In that sense. 2 Corinthians 13, verses 5 and 6. Examine yourselves whether ye be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not your own selves, how that Jesus Christ is in you, except ye be reprobates? But I trust that ye shall know that we are not reprobates. We need to look inward to ourselves. We need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to take courage and be brave. And that's so hard to do. It's so hard to talk to somebody. And it's more, there's some people who are really good at getting folks in the building, right? There's some of us that are good at that. But are we taking the time to see if they're interested in the Bible study? Do we know how to have a Bible study? Money is important. But it's not a limiting factor for us. In fact, we're probably better off financially now than we've ever been, as Jeff has said. And I don't think money was ever the limiting factor throughout history. There were, a lot of very poor people spread the word, and the church grew. What do we lack? Matthew chapter 9, verses 37 and 38. Then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into the harvest. We need people working. We need to, kind of as they say, hit the beat. And it's more than just, doing the door-to-door thing. It's establishing those relationships. They won't care what you know until they know that you care. Knocking on a door and saying hello or whatever, and people find that kind of intrusive actually. But you're not really establishing a relationship that way, are you? And it really is personal evangelism. We all participate, and it's one person at a time. We don't need a major event or where we first of all panders to some people's desires, and then try to say, hey, why don't you join us? Come to church, and hey, look, we're all happy people. Let's sit down. Do you believe in God? Do you care about that? would you like to study? We can get together, we can study a little bit if you want, and make that time. And over that time, and we have to learn how to have studies with people too. Like we can't be too pushy. We have to, in verse 10, chapter 10 of Matthew, verses 16 in particular, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. We have to know the ways of the world and understand it and navigate that without doing harm. And that's a very difficult thing to do because sometimes we're so convicted in our faith that if somebody says something that we're like, oh, that we know that's wrong, do we jump on them? Right then and there, say, well, no. We have to be very careful how we do that. And that's one of my goals is to learn how to have a Bible study. I can study the Bible, I can talk to you guys, but when we have someone who's asking some serious and hard questions, that are we truly prepared for that? And do we know how to interact socially with these people so that they know that we love them, they know that we care, and that we have that patience? Because that's going to be a hard thing for us, is to have that patience. We can practice on each other, but we need to follow through and work with people, and we ultimately have to reach out at some point, study with them, and by being consistent with that, that's the personal evangelism. It's just one person at a time. We don't need to try to get a huge, and I'm not putting down gospel meetings by any means, and sometimes those are great tools. They can be great tools, and I think they're needed. But ultimately, those only happen once in a while, and we need the consistency of day to day, week to week, and developing relationships with people. And these are the things that I'm speaking about because I've identified that as lacking in myself. And I'm sharing that with you because it's a devotional. And I feel that I need to work on that, and a lot. And it's something that I expressed a little bit to Paul not too many months ago, a desire to learn that. And so I'm trying to start to read some of this literature to get my head around, like, how do you really evangelize, and how do you work with people? But you know what? You can read all the books in the world. We got to do it. Just do it, like Nike says. And that's really, Jill, you brought that up during our when Bob Turner was here. We had our session, and it really is true. And we just gotta get in those front ranks. We gotta get out there, and it's so hard. And it takes a lot of courage. At least it feels like it for me. And so that's what I'm committed to do. I'm going to start simple, and I'm going to take little steps to start with. And I hope it's been encouraging to you, as some of these realizations for myself have been for me. And I'll put the invitation out right now that if anybody feels moved, or at any point they need any prayers or any help from the rest of us here, just please feel free to come forward.